So you're still trying to figure out the difference between what is a defined benefits plan versus a defined contributions plan and what that can mean for you? Well, in this video, I'm going to answer that question so you can have the answer coming up. Hey there, it's Billy with Keep On Cash Flow, helping you to grow your money and your mindset so that you can get to the lifestyle that you really want to lead and do that faster. Now on this channel, I'll be sharing weekly tips and strategy videos just like the one you're watching now. So if it's your first time here, do yourself a favor and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And also you'll want to make sure that you leave your comments as well as your likes in the comments that are down below. But as for today, I really want to get back to this whole point of defined contribution versus a defined benefits plan and what that can mean for you. Because a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned in another video that I was having a conversation with one of my students, and we were really talking about this whole concept of actively investing versus passively investing, or maybe passively losing money because you're not really paying attention. And we talked about in that conversation the whole concept of defined benefits and defined contribution. And to his point, he was like, I don't really know the difference. I've never heard of the difference, and so can you help me to understand? And so if you found this video, you probably are in a very similar space. And I want to be able to help you understand the two different types of plans, because a lot of times we talk about retirement plans, but these are two very different types of plans that will impact you and potentially your family in very different ways. And you know, after that conversation, I ended up finding myself sitting at a lunch table with my wife and her grandmother. And her grandmother is 101 years old. And when I started thinking about all of the different things that she's seen in her life and also how she's living her life today, it really helped me to kind of crystallize the difference between these two plans. Because her grandmother, if you can think about this, 100 years ago, I mean, she's seen some pretty amazing things in her life. She's seen everything from a civil war in her own country, where I live here in Spain. She's lived through World War II. She's lived through the Vietnam War. I mean, these are some pretty monumental things that have happened over the last 100 years. She's also seen some pretty positive things. I mean, like in 1954, she heard or saw about Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. She's seen the civil rights movement in the United States in the 60s, lived through people in space and on the moon, and even most recently, things like Facebook being founded and even the iPhone. And the reason I'm telling you that is there's a lot of things have happened. And one of the things that also happened is during that time, she lost her husband. And although she lost her husband, even today, there are benefits that continue to come to her through a defined benefits plan. And because that happened for her, there was something that actually changed, and that started in the United States in 1974 with the start of the ERISA, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act in the United States, which brought about this whole concept of defined contribution. And I want to explain the difference between the two so that you really understand, and you can ask the question at your employer, or if you're starting your own company, realize what is the right type of plan for you. And I guess also to put a little bit of context around this, in 1974, at least in the US, the average expected life, or the life expectancy, was 72 years old. Right? And retirement at that time was 65 years. So you had about 7 years, more or less, that from retirement to the end of your life. At least that's the way people saw it. And then also, if you look at where we are now today in 2018, the average life expectancy is around 79 years old. And the average retirement age is only increased 1 year, so 66 years old. So between 7 years in 1974 and 13-year difference between retirement and life expectancy, we can see that there's a pretty big gap. So understanding defined contribution versus defined benefits in terms of what will happen in payments in your retirement is something that's really important to understand. And I want to talk to you specifically about the difference between defined benefits and defined contribution along 5 axes. The first is how do you actually make the contribution, or more importantly, who makes the contribution? I want to talk to you also about where does the investment take place? I want to talk to you about how do you get the money in retirement, or how do you determine how much money you'll have in retirement? I want to talk to you about how it's paid out. And lastly, I want to talk to you about if there are any additional benefits that you can apply for. So let's start at the top. So if you look at the different types of ways that you can contribute to the plan. Now, if we look at the defined benefits plan first, this is typically something where the employer is actually contributing on behalf of the employee. At the same time, there are some plans where the employee will pay a portion and will be withdrawn from their paycheck. But in essence, typically it's the employer who is saving on behalf of the employee. If you look at your defined contribution plan, which is typically like a 401k or a 403b if you work for a private company, and if you work for a city, state, or local government, at least in the United States, it's another plan like a 457. Now, they may not call them 401k, 403b, or 457, but in your country, I'm sure there are plans that are very, very similar. So when you listen to the defined contribution plan, just think about whatever the plan is in your country. But in this type of plan, it's actually the employee who is paying out of each paycheck a portion of their salary, and usually you can use a specific portion, so you can have like up to 6% or 8%, and then you may have a match by your employer, possibly. But the majority of the contribution comes from the employee. Next, I want to talk to you about the second point, which is where the investment takes place. So if you are working for a company in a defined benefits plan, the actual way that you invest is through a pooled, everybody's money is pooled together, and it's actually handled by an asset manager. And typically the asset manager is going to invest on behalf of the entire organization, and they're going to do that in a diversified portfolio of funds typically, but it's handled by an asset manager. If we look at the defined contribution plan in terms of the way it takes place, it's really the employee. So you have the power to invest in whichever fund your specific custodian is probably offering to you. But most importantly, you are the person who's responsible for making the decisions on the investment. So let's go on to the third point. I want to talk to you about actually the way that the money is used in retirement. And so if we look at the defined benefits plan first, once again, this is going to be determined by some pre-selected criteria. It may be something like how long you've been with the company or how long you've been in a specific role will be directly correlated to the way that the money is, that you get the money in your retirement. Whereas if we look at the defined contribution plan, the way that you get your money in retirement, it's based on the amount of money that you actually saved. And that was either you saving it directly from your savings, which was withdrawn from your account, as well as if you have the option to have your employer have a specific match, their funds too. So however much money is in that specific account, including your own contribution and your employer's, if they contribute, is the amount of money that you will be distributed in your retirement. So this is the part that's really important, right? How is it paid out? And let's look at the defined benefits plan first and foremost. And I can even take you back to what we talked about, with my wife's grandmother in a bit. But specifically, once you have a defined benefits plan, the defined benefits plan will pay you for the rest of your life, which means that whatever the amount of money that you had based on the criteria that we talked about before, you will receive that same amount of money every single month for the rest of your life. So that is in terms of a defined benefits plan. It's something that your employer pays for the rest of your life. As it relates to the defined contribution plan, remember we talked about you had an amount of money that was in that pool, and that pool of money was there based on your contribution and your employer's match, and that will be done until that bucket of money runs out. Once that bucket of money runs out, well, there's no more money left. So you'll have to find other ways to supplement the income. So, and speaking of supplements, I did want to talk to you about one of the things at the very end, which are some additional benefits. And first and foremost, I want to talk about the defined benefits plan once again. Now, some of the benefits that you can receive are, as I mentioned before, for instance, pretty typically your spouse is able to also have the benefits. So in the case of my wife's grandmother, although her husband passed away, the benefits continue to stay with her until the end of her life. So one of the things that benefits is for you and your spouse, and that's supplemental, and that can go on for the rest of both of your lives. As it relates to the defined contribution plan, typically there is no passing on the benefit. If you're not here, then the benefit stops. Or you can look for finding some other type of supplemental income outside of the defined contribution plan. So hopefully that's been really clear. Like I said, I wanted to do a video that was a bit more in detail in terms of being able to help you understand the difference between the defined benefits as well as the defined contribution plan. Hopefully understanding the story will also help to crystallize it a bit. And also think about some of the things that I told you before, just in terms of the life expectancy, the way that it has gone up from 72 to 79, and the retirement age has gone from 65 to 66. So there's a lot more life when you have to make it with the same money, especially if you're on a defined contribution plan. So there are also ways for you to think about. I want you to at least have this information. Most importantly, I'd really love to get your comments in terms of what you think about this video, how helpful it's been for you. I'd really appreciate any likes that you can do, and most importantly, your comments, because I want to continue to bring you value added content. If you liked it, I'd love to hear about it. If you didn't like it, I'd also love to hear about it. Because I want to continue to make things that are going to be valuable and useful for you. So once again, everyone, my name is Billy Keels with Keep on Cash Flow. That's my 2 cents for today. And as I always like to say, hasta la próxima.